deep in an underground secret Pacific Island lair, Pop Culture Minefield presents Saturday Morning Funtime. This is the Comic Relief Crusader telling you to get your morning cereal ready, because here we go.
Well, it's Saturday morning somewhere. It's afternoon here. But we're going to be talking about some Saturday morning fun time. When Keith and I were children, there was a little TV show called Star Trek, the animated series. And it was produced by Hal Sutherland against the wishes of Gene Roddenberry, who he himself never considered it canon. But it is canon because it was written by many of the same writers that worked on Star Trek. It was voiced by most of the cast. The only person really not brought back was Anton Chekhov, played by
Pavel Chekhov.
Or Pavel.
Get your names right.
Wait, was it Anton? No, I'm thinking of the actor.
Anton was the actor.
Yeah.
Anton
So
Yelchin.
Pavel Chekhov, which I always found interesting because the Russian on Star Trek was played by a guy by the name of Walter Koenig, which also happened to be the same name as the Kraut sniper that hunted Vasilov, the famous Russian sniper during World War II. The German sniper's name was Walter Koenig.
Maybe he was named after him.
So interesting, right? But anyway,
this was also the series that won the Emmy. So it's an Emmy-winning series.
Emmy-winning series. Gene resented it because he wasn't getting paid, is really what it was. That's why he left during season 3 of Star Trek. A lot of people don't know that Fred Freiberger took over running Star Trek during the 3rd season, which is why the scripts are so really bad on some of them. Don't get me wrong, like Spock's Brain, I still will watch that episode. I love that episode. It's campy, it's weird, it's really weird.
Well, it's classic Freiberger. That one episode is I mean, if you really want to know who Fred Freiberger was and how he thought of science, or I should say science fiction for someone who does not read science fiction, which I call sci-fi, that episode is very typical of not just people like Fred Freiberger, but really everybody even currently in Hollywood. So, that episode really just says it all right there. And again, it's the reason why you can't have a lot of shows and programs as good as Star Trek, or as good as The Expanse, or as good as even the rebooted Battlestar Galactica. It cuts down on the amount of good material that we can have because so many people out there really do not understand what science fiction actually is.
Fred single-handedly destroyed 2 franchises.
Oh, yeah.
You and I have talked about this ad nauseum, that this guy brought about the destruction of Star Trek. I know it wasn't his intention. I know it wasn't his intention to do that. He was having fun. But the fact is decisions were made that brought about absolute catastrophic failure for Star Trek first, with its 3rd season, with Fred Freiberger running the show with the writing. And then again later with the 2nd season, the much anticipated 2nd season of Space 1999. It was a hit. It was a hit. Season 1 was. Season 2, it was twofold. In that one, it was the creation of ITC America, sort of like the BBC America. They had a New York headquarters, and they took over production for Space 1999. And we saw Sylvia Anderson, Jerry's wife, step down. And that immediately was a warning sign that quality was about to drop. because Sylvia was the force behind everything that they did together. She and Jerry. You know that as well as I do.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
woman was
Well,
a
I mean,
powerhouse.
you can't produce all of those programs that they produce together and not have someone be the quote unquote force. You know,
Yeah.
somebody had to be the creative and somebody had to be the force. And
So, well, I was going to say, once she stepped down, that was one step towards oblivion for Space 1999.
yeah,
Putting it in the hands of New York, second step. The third step was putting the J.J. Abrams, Alex Kurtzman of his time, Fred Freeberger, in charge of the show. It then became the thing that they didn't want to make Space 1999 or Star Trek, the monster of the week. Not only did they do that, they did one of the cheesiest things in the world and created Maya, a shapeshifter, with a gimmick. It was a gimmick. Every week it would like even in the opening titles. They also did the crazy action opening titles. Remember that? For season 2 with the
yeah,
theme song. The theme song that was great was season 1. Season 2 is just
yeah.
nothing. And it threw in this stupid action sequence of Commander Koenig suddenly standing up and firing his laser. Like, what the fuck was that? And then like Barbara Bain just walking firmly towards, past the camera. It's like,
Well, I mean, within Star Trek, Fred Freeberger really was the precursor to Harv Bennett.
and that's true because Harv Bennett, look, I think there were problems with, because Harv Bennett wasn't always a problem. Harv Bennett became a problem because before Harv Bennett, there was that lawyer asshole, the crazy guy that thought he ran the show. They talk about it on William Shatner narrated that show, Trouble on the Bridge.
Actually, that was just after Harv Bennett became a part of everything. That lawyer showed up because he had been working with Roddenberry off and on for a few years, and then
the lawyer thought because of his relationship with Roddenberry that made him something.
Yep.
And it's insane. Go watch that show. What was that show called? That documentary, Trouble
on the Bridge.
Crisis on the Bridge. Watch that documentary. Absolutely brilliantly done. Breaks down.
I mean, it is also some of that is just the same stuff with Harv Bennett. Harv Bennett thought that because he had brought in success with Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, that made him the natural successor to Roddenberry when it came to Star Trek. And he had to learn the hard way that, first of all, no, it didn't. And second of all, a lot of his ideas, again, were not science fiction based. They were sci-fi based. They were more of a kitschy pop, kind of Batman 66 view of science fiction. And that had long since passed. If you were going to take everything into the future, you needed someone who understood a little more science of what science fiction actually was and the difference between the two.
And speaking of brilliant, thank you very much, Six. You are beyond generous.
Yeah, Six, you're awesome.
Yeah, if you can't see it, it's like a little lemon and a bunch of little flowers are spawning around it. Thanks a bunch.
Hold on, I'll give her a video.
Yeah.
Which one?
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
I'll buy that for $1.
So, Keith, what was the exact process, from Star Trek being canceled to this series getting on the air?
Oh, thanks for asking that question. Basically, what it came down to is that Star Trek, as soon as it was left the air, was shuffled into syndication and basically started becoming popular. You started having conventions pop up, and almost all the actors appearing at various fan conventions that started popping up. And eventually you had all the actors were getting paid for syndication syndicated episodes of the show. Every time a show is a particular episode is reran, everybody involved with it, almost everybody involved with it, gets a paycheck. You know, the producers, the actors, the directors, the writers. And in syndication, everybody got paid. Everybody but William Shatner. William Shatner got a divorce, so his wife got all the money. And Shatner was kind of living like a 19 to 20-year-old up and coming actor that hadn't made it. Even though the show, by the early 1970s, was one of the major hit shows on broadcast syndicated television.
He got
I mean,
screwed
the show
over.
was based.
Shatner.
Well, he got screwed over in terms of how he was remarked about amongst the cast,
Yeah.
and what happened at the conventions, and all of the stories told that eventually became part of the legend of William Shatner rather than the reality.
And
And
that's because, once again, we need to really put it out there again. Shatner was working all the time, and he didn't have time for those conventions. And these guys that were day actors, that's all they were. The ones who talked shit about him, like, Takei, were day actors. They were. Uhura wasn't even a regular cast member. The reason why she would disappear on the show is because she only had so many hours that she could be on the show. And once those hours were used, they would have to pull somebody in else to do it because she was a day worker. Right?
Yeah.
I was talking
That's what
to
I
Keith.
mean by getting screwed over.
Yeah.
He was struggling. He was struggling, and the others were talking bad about him, and that just sucked.
Yeah. He wasn't there to defend himself. And I got to be honest, if he had been there, they wouldn't have had the balls to fucking do it.
No, they wouldn't.
And it really makes what they did sneaky and dirty. And that's why I have problems with George Takei and the cast that like to talk shit about him. And the other thing, I'll always defend Shatner about is that Shatner understood better than anybody what they were doing. And he understood that if he wasn't successful as a character on the show would fail. And he knew that. It wasn't dependent because there was this big dig that was made at Shatner over the fact that he would take people's lines, in the script and go, actually, the captain probably should say that. It wasn't him being a pig. It was him understanding that the audience needs that, because all Star Trek was wagon train in space. That's all it was. It was a Western in space and based on Wagon Train, the show. And he was the head of the wagon train. And he understood that there are some things that the lead character needs to do in a show like that. And they would get all, I'm not going to use the dirty word, but they would get butthurt by anything he did. And they resented him and hated him for it. And it's like, you got your paycheck no matter what. You didn't get paid by the word. You got paid as a day worker.
Yeah, so with that, so it's in syndication. How does it go from syndication to Filmation?
Well, again,
picking it up.
Once, and Keith knows this better than I do, once it went into syndication, became popular again, the show was getting picked, or the cast members were being popular. Starlog magazine came into existence because of Star Trek and its popularity. And it was there for the first Star Trek convention. And with this popularity, suddenly there was like, we should do another series. And Hal Sutherland had this company. And God, I love Hal Sutherland, really. He saw an opportunity, and I'm certain Keith will probably know more details on how this came about. I don't know why we lost him. It sucks.
He probably just reached home and is going to continue on
So
the computer.
I would say let's save the part of this answer to him. But Hal Sutherland saw an opportunity and seized it, because by doing what he did, and there was a real tug of war on how to do this because they wanted the cast, but they couldn't afford the entire cast because they weren't going to. Who was it? They weren't going to bring Uhura or Sulu back. But Nimoy said that he wasn't going to join them unless they were brought back, and so they brought everybody but Chekhov back on the show. But to make amends with Walter Koenig, they hired him to work on the show. So he wrote Infinite Vulcan, one of the best episodes of the
That
series.
I just watched last night.
It's a very good story. And they only had 22 minutes, 18 to 22 minutes to do these stories. So they're done quickly. The budget went into the cast. So the animation was, the artwork was really well drawn. But
It's just
they
so
were
weird
real.
that the eyes are skin color. That threw me off.
Well,
a little
that's
bit.
just it. They had to cut corners as much as possible. So really, it looks like an animatic and or I would even say like motion comic more than it is an animated series. But you got to see an animated version of the Enterprise. They had all the sound effects were there. I think the only weird one, which you saw, that lizard creature that attacks Spock's pet.
The colors were off.
The
That was weird.
The audio sound of that creature was Godzilla.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yes, he was Godzilla.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't even like kind of like, it was absolutely Godzilla's roar. And I just laugh every time I hear it. But that's a great freaking episode. We get that story of Spock being picked on for being half human. All of that you see in Star Trek, J.J. Abrams' version of Star Trek, they showed that scene of him getting picked on. That's right out of the animated series.
Yeah.
It is considered canon, and more importantly, it made up the entire 5-year mission. We got our 5th year mission because of the animated series. And I just love that show so much. I cannot praise it any more than I already do. It's just one of the best shows. I don't care about the animation being choppy. It's just really good. And of course, Hal Sutherland was colorblind. And he had the type of colorblind where like gray and what color was it? Hold on, let me take a look.
It's red and green usually.
No, it was straight up colorblind. This meant that he was seeing pink for light gray because of this little mutation in Sutherland's retinal cone. We're left with some very pretty additions to the show, including the Klingons' ultraviolet vests and some of the weird greens that he picked. It's just crazy colors. And the production crew didn't know he was colorblind. So he goes, "Does this look okay to you?" And they're like, "Yeah, are you sure that's the color? That's the color I want." This is crazy. Once they figured out his colorblindness, it saved future animated shows from suffering the same problem. Star Trek was the one show that suffered from it. But
It does give it a kind of charm, though. I do admit that from what I was watching, because there's just something. It becomes almost surreal in some areas with it. Like, why is it like this?
It's true, yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, I cannot thank you enough,
So-
Gary, for kicking my ass about not liking animated stuff, because I haven't seen much and I haven't seen anything good, apparently. Because he was like, "Oh, no, you're going to watch Archer with me." And I fell in love with that show. And then Bob's Burgers came around and Vox Machina, and now I'm just loving it. I regret only having started to watch this series yesterday. Because
Well,
I
I'm
was
glad you
avoiding
did.
it. I
And
was
this show
avoiding
is
it because
great.
I
I'm
thought
gonna
it's
show-
animated. So I'm stupid.
Right. Yeah, it's animated can be good. I love the writing on this, but here I'm going to show you something else. They could not get the rights to the original theme by Alexander Courage, so they had to do their own. I'm going to get claimed on this later. I don't care. I'll mute it later or delete it. But I want to show the animated series opening titles, which includes a new recording of Shatner doing the voiceover.
Wouldn't they also have to pay Gene if they use the original?
Okay, don't talk over the animation because I have to delete this later. I don't want you to waste what you got to say while I'm doing that. And there you go. That was
My
the theme. Now,
blind
what were you going to
child.
say, Shinatsky?
Wouldn't they also have to pay Gene Roddenberry, because that was his whole thing with the Star Trek theme, that he had copyright because he'd written the lyrics for it?
I don't know about that. I don't know that.
There
But I know
are
he owned
lyrics
the
for
rights
the
to
original theme, but they were bad, so they never got used.
Well, yeah, no,
Yeah,
but
thank God.
he wanted to basically make all the money he could. So he wrote lyrics for it, even though it didn't have them. So every time it was used by ASCAP rules, you get paid. So it was basically him getting more money for himself.
And I hate saying this about Gene Roddenberry, but Gene Roddenberry was very money driven. That's why he abandoned Star Trek in the third season. And he did. He abandoned it. And everybody felt like he had abandoned them. Because he did. He was money driven. And I hate thinking about that with the guy, but that's what he was. He was a money hungry dude. Everything he did was to move towards the cash grab. And it's one of the only really major, there's two disappointing aspects of who Gene Roddenberry was. Possibly even three, because he also took credit where he shouldn't have taken credit. But it's the same shit we see with Stan Lee. I love Stan Lee, but Stan Lee took credit for things he shouldn't have taken credit for. Gene would do the same thing. It's one of the big differences between Gene and George Lucas, because they knew each other. They were friendly with each other. And George Lucas actually was there from the beginning with the design stuff. He would come in and describe what he wanted designed for Star Wars. He wanted hot rods in space. He wanted it to have a specific look. So he was right there on top of it. Gene really wasn't like that. George was. There's Keith. So now we can go back into your question about syndication. I explained to them more about the popularity, Keith, of Star Trek going into the 70s with it going into syndication.
Yes.
So go ahead and finish explaining what you were going to explain about Star Trek getting picked up as an animated series and how it happened and how Sutherland, of all people, got that contract.
Well, what it came down to is that, everybody realized after Star Trek had gone off the air that they'd made a mistake in canceling the show. So they tried to find many different ways to try to get it back. And one of those ways was through animation and through Filmation. Filmation as a studio started to rise in popularity and became one of the dominant newer air quotes, animation chiefs for Saturday morning. They were quick, they were fast, and unlike an increasing number of other animation studios, they were all American. They did everything they needed to do as far as creating animation inside of one place, a warehouse in I think it was in Hollywood. They did everything in downtown Hollywood inside of a warehouse, and everything from writing to all of the basic elements of sketching, all pre-production, animation, and post-production were done right there. They never sent anything outside the United States. And really, that entire crew there was a well-oiled machine. And Star Trek was just a part of an increasing number of shows that they would develop that would become popular and successful across all Saturday morning. In fact, when they got the contract for Star Trek, they went straight for trying to make sure that they brought over as many writers from the original show as possible, because the Star Trek as a series was that popular. I mean, really, it just became embarrassing how popular that show became in the aftermath of having been canceled only just a few years before. And so that led to, as I said before, a mad scramble, but also other creatives trying to fill that void in the years after Star Trek went off the air. that's eventually what led to shows like Space 1999 being created. But let's get back all the way to 1973. Uh, the the understanding was that they were smart enough to understand that they needed the writers from the original series to come on board and create a show that was a continuation, because it was thought that was probably the only way they were going to be able to continue what they had started with the series in any form or fashion, since Shatner was constantly busy, since Nimoy was doing various things. It was just easier to just go ahead and try animation. And plus, they weren't the only television series to take that route. Filmation would go on to bring back the Brady Bunch, or in this case, the Brady Kids, but also give life to many popular performers of that era. The Jackson Five, the Osmonds, even creating an entire series around a young teen pop idol from Australia by the name of Rick Springfield. So Star Trek was just a feather in their cap. And it was definitely something that NBC took the opportunity to truly put out there and promote. Much to their
Can I
credit.
bring up some of the stuff that he did?
Sure.
It started back in the 60s. He was the guy who brought Superman and Batman back to TV with the animated adventures of Superman and the adventures of Batman.
Yes, yes.
He's the guy who did the Archies, Josie and the Pussycats. This guy did the first animated Aquaman series. He did Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the first iteration of it.
He had the contract for DC, so he didn't just do what you just named. He did the Justice League. He did
Super Friends, Titans. All of it. But let's not forget one of the most popular shows when we were a kid, Fat Albert.
Well, now he didn't do the Super Friends. That's a different contract.
Oh, I thought he did Super Friends.
No, he did. Filmation didn't do Super Friends. That's a different contract.
Okay.
What Filmation did was Filmation had the contract for DC. So what they did was they created animated versions of Superman, Batman, the Justice League, and the first animated iteration of the original Teen Titans. Although in that iteration they had everybody but Robin, because the Robin character was
but Robin?
Say what?
Who's this but Robin?
Gary.
Anybody but the character of Robin was they weren't allowed to use Robin on the animated version of the Teen Titans, so they had everybody else, and it worked out really well. But eventually they lost the DC contract to Hanna-Barbera, who was in the middle of also changing ownership. And so Hanna-Barbera was eventually based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's where everything that they had for the Super Friends came along. And speaking of the Super Friends, both shows premiered on the same day at the exact same time on Saturday, September 8th, 1973, which just happened to be the same exact date that Star Trek had originally premiered on NBC back in '66. So the series did very well. I mean, again, as I said, it did well enough to win an Emmy. And it had the full participation of all of the original actors, with the exception of Walter Koenig, who eventually came back, I think, to write an episode. Koenig himself was
wrote
busy.
Infinite Vulcan.
Yes. Koenig himself was busy. He was busy off doing other television shows like the Star Lost, and other things. But and James Doohan himself was also a
Oh,
We lost
I
him.
think we
So
lost
I,
him.
I wanted to get into
uh,
a couple of things with this, because he also was involved. Like the big hit for Hal Sutherland came about in 1983, but before that, he had Space Sentinels, which included ISIS, by the way, and he had Flash Gordon, the series back in '79. Gilligan's Planet was a cash grab over licensing, and it was not a hit. It didn't even survive a first
well,
season before it was canceled.
we keep
But
saying Hal
He-Man,
Sutherland, but you
I
also
wanted
have
to.
to remember who the other person was, which was Lou Scheimer. Lou Scheimer actually ran Filmation, and Hal Sutherland was one of the people that worked with and under eventually Lou Scheimer.
It specifically worked in the animation area, but I wanted to point it out that in '83 was when they got their big break with a show that became a massive hit, which was He-Man.
Yeah, the show that Netflix wanted you to understand the basic premise, but didn't want you to really understand who all these people were, as Kevin Smith and his crew made fun of a lot of these people.
Yeah, and we're not. I refuse to talk about that cocksucker anymore. So, fuck Kevin Smith. I hope he's crying. I hope he's crying right now.
Oh no, I don't blame Kevin
Glad
Smith.
he's
I
not
blame
dead
Kevin
though.
Smith.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Blame his boss. I
He's a
blame the
bitch.
guy he worked for at Netflix.
No, the better
Oh yeah, because
question
that's all he
is,
was a mouthpiece
The
for
beard.
that asshole.
Yeah, he was a mouthpiece for that dude.
You were saying something, Shinatsky?
I was saying with Kevin Smith, no, you don't ask if he's crying. You ask when is he not crying.
Okay. Pigs in Space was absolutely a Star Trek spoof. Absolutely. But going back to this series, I believe, and you're going to probably tell us how right I am, is that there was an opportunity with the popularity of Star Trek growing after it was canceled. And by the way, I put it in the notes that you and I talked about this before, that if Star Trek had made one more season, the Nielsen ratings were changing because it was the following year that they changed their demographics.
Yes.
And Star Trek would have been recognized for the hit that it was.
Yes.
If it had just
The numbers would have
one more
borne that
year.
out. It would have borne that out. But you know what, though? It's probably also, to balance it out, probably a good thing, because in the scramble to bring the show back, there were a lot of other opportunities that came the way of that particular IP. A lot of the initial things they did to attempt to bring it back would really test the boundaries and limits of technology as far as television and in syndication and other areas. Everything that came after benefited from having Star Trek around, including to a certain extent even Star Wars itself. Star Trek was an influential program in being able to get Hollywood to consider to do certain things, to catch up, really, in terms of what Star Trek meant and how you would build a fan base. And that's the other thing. You are talking a legion of fans starting from 1966 on. And we're looking at one of the best writing staffs ever put together for a science fiction series. Star Trek stands head and shoulders above a good number of other programs because of its writing staff. I'll tell you here and now, even to this day, even with someone like J. Michael Straczynski, you continue to give Star Trek credit for having one of the best writing staffs ever, which again is ironic considering the level of writing that you have for the current Trek shows as licensed through CBS, currently now Paramount. So,
Keith,
because it's the exact opposite.
Wait, New Trek has writers? I thought they just threw shit at the.
No, they do have writers. They're just
I
not.
thought it
They're
was
just writers.
Brian.
They're just writers that are not familiar with what science fiction actually is. You know, this new generation of writers really have no idea what science fiction is. You know, the thing that doesn't get talked about enough about Star Trek is the number of people who actually were familiar or had written themselves science fiction, published authors, award-winning talent that was brought in to work on that show. So by having them go from the television series to Star Trek the animated series, you were bringing in a lot of talent to do that, and it doesn't get talked about enough. It's the same thing with, say, like Buffy. Seriously, when you look at the talent of the writers and even the casting people, you do realize you wouldn't have the success of the MCU without the two casting people that worked for them in casting all of those actors. Well, both of them got their start working with Joss Whedon on the Buffy stuff.
Yeah.
Talent means something, you know, and when you bring in talented people who know what they're doing, but also are fans of the work of what you're putting together, that means something.
Well, exactly.
You
And it's
can't just
something.
try to. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's just something that was shared between Gene Roddenberry and I just forgot his name, the creator of Twilight Zone. They
Rod
both
Serling?
knew a lot of this. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
They both knew a lot of the same authors, and they shared the pool and passion about bringing in the single best writers of the of mysterious science fiction and macabre. And
Yeah, well, there was a better understanding of science fiction as a genre back then. Nowadays, people, when you say science fiction, you get many people, way too many people, that think you're talking about sci-fi, and it's still kind of different. Hollywood's version of science fiction is not the same. So the reason why you could still have successful shows by a miracle, like Battlestar Galactica or The Expanse, that's what you get. Especially The Expanse is a good example of someone who got their start with Star Trek, going in and helping to create. In fact, both those shows are successful because of Star Trek. You had former Star Trek writers that turned around and created two brilliant television shows. And one did it against the odds. They took a property that had already been out there and basically rehabbed the heck out of it and created Battlestar Galactica again, and was more successful than the first time around. And with The Expanse, you had someone that had gotten a lot of work done working on shows like DS9 and Voyager, who then used all that experience to launch one of the best original science fiction programs of the last 20 years, without a doubt. And the show that haunts Alex Kurtzman, because that's really what he wants to make. That's why he was busy trying to turn Discovery into The Expanse.
yeah, and failing.
Failing horribly. But to get back to Star Trek the animated series, if you were a child growing up and were a fan of DC Comics or comics in general, and of Star Trek, you had a difficult choice to make every Saturday morning, starting, September 8th of 73 on, and for the next two seasons. You had a difficult choice. You could either watch the further adventures of Captain Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise, or you could watch Super Friends. And that show was a monster. Both shows were very successful.
I will say this, that the writing for this series, because I haven't watched this until you guys, we're doing it for this episode. I'm like, this is actually relatively well crafted storytelling, especially for what they would generally aim for a kid show at the time.
Yes. And again, it's there's a reason why every episode of the animated series got treatment to be turned into novelizations, rather
Yeah.
well written novelizations. That was how well it was all written, and so it's difficult to look at what a lot of what passes for entertainment aimed at young people, let alone entertainment aimed at Star Trek fans nowadays that just happens to be animated and try to take it seriously. It's two different things. Again, that's nothing against the people who enjoy the current animation stuff from what passes for Star Trek now. It's just that it's just not as good.
Well,
Yeah,
Now,
and I wanted to point out, by the way, another thing that was beloved on the animated series was the recurring characters that they would bring back from the show. One of which was Harry Mudd, with Mudd's women, and what was it? The other one that they did on the, because he came back twice on the original series, and then they brought him back for a third time on the animated series. You had the guy with the trouble with tribbles. That
David Crow.
what's that? Yeah, Cyrano Jones is the character's name. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Cyrano was in one episode written by David Gerald, The Trouble with Tribbles, and then David Gerald returned to write the animated sequel, and they brought Cyrano Jones back with more tribbles, bigger tribble troubles. Oh, we got two Keiths. I don't know what to do. I'm outnumbered.
hey, better than was it eating them because they have human DNA and God, I can't even say it.
Yeah, I don't want to even get into that Kurtzman, J.J. Abrams crap. So the tribbles, though, they found the part of that story I liked is that they found a creature that actually eats tribbles, and it was apparently something discovered by the Klingons because they are terrified and freaked out by tribbles, and tribbles don't like them, so they growl at them or whatever the hell it is they do, freak out over them. And so it leads to a plot where the Klingons are trying to kill Cyrano, and the Federation saves him with Captain Kirk on the Enterprise, only to find out that that creature is stolen and property of the Klingon Empire.
Yep.
And it's I do like the episode. It's cheeky in the fact that when one of the Klingons fires his disruptor at the giant tribble, it explodes into thousands of little tiny tribbles. And the Klingon says, "Don't do that again."
Well, that's I think one of the episodes from the first season under the direction of Hal Sutherland, who eventually left the show after the first season and was replaced by Bill Reed for the second season of the show.
And what do you think the big difference was?
There wasn't much of a
Quality-wise.
difference because you kept up the high quality of the writing, and that was the great thing about this show. The writing was just excellent across the board. People, Star Trek fans, ones that have been around a long time, really do, seem to have an appreciation of this show and its characters. So much so that this is also part of the Roddenberry Project. This is one of all of the different versions of the Enterprise bridge. This version of the bridge, the animated version, is also one of the ones brought to life by CGI.
Yeah, because they changed the bridge in the animated series.
Oh, they changed the bridge on the series. There are 3 different versions of the
Talking
Enterprise.
about a major change, because the thing that sits up above them
Yes.
wasn't in the original series. It was something created just for the animated series. I forget what it's called. But they've got the CG animated. It's a real world looking CG bridge based on the bridge of the animated series, and I've already done the walkthrough on it. It's awesome.
Also, some of the characters too, Lieutenant Imris
With the 3 arms. Yep.
And a few others are brought to life They're going to be brought to life, I should say, for the Roddenberry project. So they will officially be crossing paths with Spock and a few of the other characters that are a part of this project. So it's canon. Even though Roddenberry wasn't the biggest fan of what this animated series was, it definitely is canon. And
and Gene didn't want it. He didn't consider it, but that doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
I mean,
I tell people all the time, the connections are there, the DNA is there, so he can deny it all he wants to.
I can
we, the
understand.
fans, are the ones that determine if we accept something as canon.
Well,
there's one thing also that this series has an advantage of over the original, despite the low budget. They can actually have legitimate alien crew members and people in the series.
And that was nice.
I
like that too.
That have a little bit of makeup and like an appendage added to their forehead. But like you have bird people, you have plant people, you have, and they look nothing humanoid.
Yep, I agree. You were about to say something, Keith.
I was just going to say, while it is all right to be fans and to have opinions and to have likes and dislikes, I think there is still something to be said, though, for the views of the creators. And I think Roddenberry himself eventually kind of came off of that a bit. He was very harsh initially about the animated series.
Well, it's because he wasn't making very much money off of it.
That's right. But he eventually softened his view on it. That's one of the reasons why they're doing what they're doing with the animated series as part of the Roddenberry project, which his son is actually a part of. That's something that he has more of a control of than he does for the Star Trek series that CBS is putting together. This is all really just something that is easier to accept like that because of the quality of the writing that they had continued from the original series. Now, unlike, say, let me pick something out of the hat, Star Wars, or even the current Star Trek, you don't have that. There is no real connection outside of the legal stuff. Whereas, a company owns the right to be able to create new episodes, so they can basically, if they own the rights to the original and they have the right to make new episodes, and they can tell you that, whatever, they can say, well, this is officially canon according to us, even though the people that actually are responsible for the original stuff that they're using as the basis may have a different opinion. And in that respect, well, then screw those people and screw a lot of the fans. Logic dictates that a lot of the Kurtzman stuff is its own individual reality. It contradicts way too much stuff to be the official story for a lot of this. So,
by the way,
yeah.
By the way, one thing that they could do, but of course this would have involved actual creativity and thought. You know what they could have actually done? They could have decided to do Star Trek season 4 as an actual thing. Like, obviously have to recast everyone, but do it in the same style, get like a new younger cast going and try to do things in that format. See how it works for a season. If it does well, then do season 5. And you could have done, this gap because it didn't exist. So you can fit stuff in. I don't know why we live in an era where like one person has to play the same character and over again forever. Mm-hmm. And if they get old, we have to CGI them. It's like, we can accept people playing younger versions of characters. We accepted Chris Pine as Kirk. So other people can play that.
Yeah, I got to tell you, the casting was great for J.J. Abrams. It was the production I had a problem with, the writing. But before we go, we got to go to break here in a couple of minutes. I want to do some reading here. And also want to say hi to everybody in the chat. Because, I hate neglecting them. We have Andy Morrow, who has been, he admitted to it, inundating me with memes and posts. Penny, of course, is here. Good morning, Penny. Slasher Fred, Dragon Ruse, Alex Moore. The lovely Six is here. Cocho Dragon is here. Let's see. Mighty Orbots. War Monkey. Let's see. Who else? Scribe Light's here. Zax is here, my good friend. Anti-Derivative Jill is here. Willie the Monkey King's music. The AI show, and not your, but our Muslim uncle is here. Assalamu alaikum, as Polly Shore would say. And now let's get into some reading here. We got some good comments. One, yes, I know I was crackling. It happens anytime I have two screens. Anytime I use something on the other screen, even if you're not seeing it, Six, because I'm on a laptop, it's going to do that. It'll break up. It's nothing I can do about it. But you are right. And Animo's right too, because I was sharing something, but I wasn't I was sharing it behind the cameras, and then I shared it on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Gene Roddenberry. Did Gene Roddenberry have any other meaningful success outside of Star Trek? No, not really.
He had a lot of different
success, but no, not really.
He had a lot of different ideas he came up with, a lot of different pilots, and it's what I've often said. You know, you've had two shows based on concepts that he was not able to get filmed that eventually became shows.
Series. He had a horror series.
Yeah,
you and I both watched the pilot for.
Yeah,
called Spectre. That I wish had taken off.
Yeah.
What's his name? Robert Culp.
Robert Culp. And a lot of his ideas, I've often argued, you could.
I got to get through these. We only have a couple minutes. I'm sorry, man. Gary, did you know Final Fantasy 16 has a backdoor reference in it? No, I didn't. Thank you, Jay.
See, we keep finding backdoors in the stuff that we're watching.
It's everywhere, man. There's backdoors everywhere.
Yes.
Star Trek, the animated series, succeeded to the extent it did because it took a sci-fi series that would be amendable to an animated format and made it work. And it absolutely did. Absolutely did. Thank you, the AI show. Let's see. Anti-Derivative Jill says, my favorite episodes are Yesteryear, Eye of the Beholder. Those are two great episodes.
Yeah.
They are in my top 10. Yes, real sci-fi authors continue to write for the animated series, including previous Trek authors, with DC Fontana. Yeah, exactly. As the effective showrunner. Very much so. A lot of people know DC Fontana was a woman.
And still continued to write a lot of things. In fact, one of the books that she wrote that was Star Trek related is one of the basis for how they're writing the latest Star Trek series that's on right now. But they give her no credit for all the stuff they're using by her.
They don't give women of the past credit because they didn't start using women until recently, if you didn't know that in Hollywood. Read by Nature says, I recall Filmation doing Flash Gordon. I couldn't quite get into that show. A lot of people couldn't. That's why I think it only lasted one season. I was more into He-Man and Brave Star, and Brave Star was a bigger hit than Flash Gordon, but He-Man was a Goliath show. That thing became so. My son was a huge fan, Benjamin, huge fan of He-Man. Anti-Derivative Jill says, haha, the Gilligan's Island animated failed because they made them too silly. That's true. It was already a cartoon. You were totally right. It was already a cartoon. And they tried to make it more cartoony, and it didn't work. Nailed that one on the head. Slasher Fred says, I think that Pigs in Space. Yes, absolutely. I think I already read that one earlier. I love that DC Fontana tried to make this show like TS rather than a children's show. It is. It's simplified. And that's the only thing that makes it a kid's show, is it's so simplified. It's not dumbed down. It's simplified. It's still really
to make it fit in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You had to simplify it.
Exactly. Let's see. Slasher Fred says, one of the episodes I remember is when the ship's computer becomes a practical joker.
Yep.
Let's see. Gary is crackling. Yeah, that's that problem. Sorry, Six. I think that Star Trek the Animated Series was one of the first animated series where the original cast played the characters. Yes, absolutely, because a lot of times they would hire voice actors, but they knew they were dealing with a fan base. They were smart. Hal Sutherland and Lou Scheimer knew they were dealing with a built-in fan base. That's why they got Star Trek. So, boom.
And there were a lot of other shows, Lester Fred. If you heard what I said earlier, they did it with the Brady Bunch, and they did it with,
and they brought back the cast. Exactly.
Yes.
So absolutely, and thank you again for the $20 super sticker. I don't know what it is. Anybody see it so I can know what it is?
It
Oh.
was a lemonade, a big giant lemon person cheering at the thing, and there was a bunch of there's a bush with a bunch of flowers like blooming behind.
Oh, that's neat.
Because it was for
Thank you,
me.
Six. Of course, it's for you.
Thank you.
Everything's about you. Slasher Fred, the last comment. And then we got to go to break. Captain's log, star date 6/24/23. We are on a mission to review and discuss an underrated animated series, which is a spin-off of one of the classic TV series of all time. Greatest, yes. Greatest classic. I know you meant to say that and you left it out, but I know you meant it. Thank you very much, Slasher Fred. With that, we're going to go to our first and only commercial break. Our first commercial, the only commercial break. And Bill, take us away. Woo! Sometime. Are we still here? What's going on?
Bill,
I
did
think
he
Bill
die?
I think Bill died.
Bill,
I hope
no,
not.
come back.
But we are going.
Hold on.
right.
I'm going to
Oh.
see if it's available. Nope, it's not available. I have to go back to the main show. So we're just going to go to commercial break. Here we go. Hi, guys. This is Gary from Pop Culture Minefield here on KGRA, and we're leaving for our first break. I hope we survive.
Did you know 75%
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Oh, wow. We survived. Welcome back to the commercial break. Now for some more Pop Culture Minefield on KGRA. Now, I wanted to point out, too, that there's a couple of other people that were brought back for the animated series. Majel Barrett, Roddenberry at the time, she was still married to him, was returned as Christine Chappell. And Mark Leonard reprised his role of Sarah, Spock's father. Oh, and what's her name? Came back as Amanda. She played Amanda in the Star Trek series.
What wasn't Mage also the computer?
Yes.
Occasionally. She didn't become the real voice of the computer until Next Generation. Because the computer didn't always talk. The cast would do a computation, then read it off themselves.
Mostly Spock.
Yeah. So, but occasionally Chappell would voice the computer on Star Trek. But later on Next Generation, it became a character in the show. The ship itself was a character where it would respond and speak aloud, and that was Majel Barrett. And I don't know what they're doing for current Trek because it still sounds like her.
Well, she was able to record a lot of stuff before she died. She got in. They were able to pretty much have enough material that they could technically.
They could just keep doing it.
Yeah, you just need her saying all the words you need, and then you just put it together and make it sound good.
Whatever new Star Trek.
That's good. See, I wasn't sure if they had done that. That's interesting.
Well, they talked about it for Picard season 3 because everybody was impressed with the fact that the computer sounded the same. When spoilers, they were able to bring back a certain Star Trek starship of note and the computer voice. So
that is interesting. Another actor that doesn't get any attention for being on Star Trek is Ted Knight. He was a regular voice for Filmation, voice actor. He did a lot of stuff. Like he would do opening narration. In fact, on our Saturday morning fun time, when you hear Mike do that voice, Comic Relief Crusader, he's doing Ted Knight from the classic Filmation years.
Yeah.
But a guy that we haven't brought up yet is Norm Prescott. And he was the other power behind Filmation.
Mm-hmm.
And he, of course, was also directly involved with the production of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. We have another comment. I want to read this one out loud. I enjoyed Star Trek, the animated series, as a kid. I saw it frequently, but I love it as an adult. I feel like it almost was a callback to more sci-fi, heavy episodes of early season. Yes. And again, what they pulled off with this series was giving us 5-year mission. That's what we wanted. We wanted our 5-year mission, and we got it thanks to the animated series.
Yeah.
So,
well,
you were going to add something else, Keith?
No, I was just going to say that we can go through some of the episodes, starting with the first season, because there's a few trivia and a few things related to certain episodes. Because, look, we've already talked about a few of the episodes because people that have seen this, they have certain episodes that really, really stand out to them. And there's a reason for that. They're so well done. But let's start with the original pilot episode that if you
Beyond
were
the Farthest Star.
awake and alive, I should say, on September 8th, 1973, the episode you would have started with would have been
Beyond the Farthest Star.
That's right. And so
it's a great episode.
Yes. It's written by Samuel A. Peoples, who is one of the classic
Star Trek writers.
Well, was one of the Star Trek writers. I got to not say that word again because there's only one Star Trek. But that particular episode did not air in Los Angeles until December 22nd of 73 due to George Takei's run for LA City Council. Takei's opponents claimed that if the episode that featured him aired before the election, it would violate the equal time law in which the political candidates must have equal time on air for any non-news programs. So for that region, Yesteryear was the premiere episode of the series.
By the way, he created a famous character. He created Savick.
Oh, really?
Because Savick was original on something else that he created. It was called Dr. Savick, and it evolved into Savick on Star Trek.
Oh, see, now that I did not know.
Yeah.
Look right at you. Bringing it.
Sam Peoples.
How is that possible? Keith is our computer.
There are various things I really do not know. But
and then Gary goes and pulls something like that out of his ass.
I know.
Well, that's why he and I are friends. Stop acting surprised. He and I would sit and just talk for hours and decided, these conversations should be a show.
What? He's the Keith 9000. He is the arbiter of the information database.
There you go.
Their information databases.
It's what happens when you hang out
where
with
they do
Keith,
not have
you
as
just
much
talk for
information.
Well, I really do appreciate everybody, thinking that I know a lot more than what my family will tell you that I do, but but I have fun, and that's the real reason why I do all of this. I have fun, and I get to hang out with Gary and Anima and everyone. So thank you for your kind words. The next episode is one of my personal favorites, and it's called Yesteryear. And that one was actually written by Roddenberry and DC Fontana. And this is really one of the few times that I can definitely say that Star Trek got time travel correct, in my opinion. There's more revealed about Spock for this particular episode.
Well, it's where the whole thing with his pet and where he gets into a fight with the other Vulcan children for being a mudblood, half-blood.
Well, it's a good character backstory episode because we don't really get that in the original series, if I remember right.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, in fact, Spock is the only character to get a backstory
yeah. Well,
before the new movies.
here's something that you may not know. James Doohan had recorded lines for Sarek, but they were not used when it was found that Mark Leonard was available to do the lines.
And it was nice hearing his voice because he has a very distinct voice.
He was also the first cast member of Star Trek I ever met. Was Mark Leonard.
That is really cool. You know, for years, he and Walter Koenig were neighbors and they were close friends.
Wow.
And every Halloween, the two of them would get together and pool their money and make a haunted house for everybody, adults and kids alike. And the most famous one ended up in Starlog because they recreated the Nostromo and the alien just for Halloween. Mark Leonard and Walter Koenig did that together.
Wow.
They were close friends. A lot of people don't know that. Very chummy with one another. But,
see, this is if you've never seen the animated series and you only had to pick, in my opinion, one episode, but you are a fan of the series that started it all, this is the episode yesteryear, as far as I'm concerned. That
it is the single best episode of the series. It is.
It's just a great episode. And again, you have the two best people to write it. That if you're going to pick any two people to do it, and that's Roddenberry and Fontana. So
now another popular one going down the line is episode 7, and I don't mind jumping around if we do.
Yeah, go ahead.
I like Infinite Vulcan, and it was written by Walter Koenig, and it's actually a really good story. And it's one of the first ones where we really get exposure to aliens that are not humanoid. And it also leads to one of the gayest martial arts moves I've ever seen.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That cracked me up. That cracked me up.
And then later, George, Kirk goes, maybe later you could teach me to use that special jujitsu move you used. And fucking Sulu goes, maybe later, Captain. Wink. And he winks, and I'm like, oh my God, could you have made it even
gay? I know why Gary really likes this episode, because they nearly kill off Sulu.
Sulu almost gets killed, but the reason I love it is because you get two Spocks that interact with each other. And I thought that was cool because they clone Spock and make a giant. I still to this day, like, what was the point of him being giant? And then I realized, because they want to enforce their peace on other people, so therefore being larger is more threatening. Got it. Okay.
To quote Peacemaker, they're going to do everything they can for peace, even if it means killing everyone else.
Yeah, it's really their philosophy in the story. If you really pay attention, that is it. And it's like, that's scary. And of course, Kirk outwits him and says, we've already found peace through the Federation.
Man, lucky this didn't happen in the middle of the Dominion War. It's like, you need peace in the universe. It's like, we got the Dominion War going on.
Well, now, the idea of the Felosians was forced upon Walter Koenig by Gene Roddenberry. He wanted a race of talking planets in the animated series because it was not possible to do on the original series. Koenig had to write 10 to 12 drafts of the script before it was accepted by Roddenberry. According to Koenig, he was offered the chance to write additional scripts for the series. However, he turned it down because of Roddenberry's excessive and controlling demands for rewrites. So as a result, this is the only episode he ever wrote.
This is not the only person to complain about that.
Yeah.
Because he goes all the way back to the original series. There was a lot of frustration with Roddenberry over the writing by some of the staff, including, even though he is full of shit on one thing, Harlan Ellison.
Harlan Ellison did have, his ups and downs, although if he were still around today, he'd be chewing a lot of these so-called
oh my God. Could you imagine what he'd do to Star Trek right now?
Jeez. I miss him.
I know we've got friends that go, I like Star Trek. Doesn't mean it's good. Doesn't mean it's good.
A lot of actors keep bringing it up that they need to be word perfect. Like they don't have alterations from the script. It needs to be exactly the way it's written. It's a Star Trek thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially
Wow.
when you got, because Kurtzman's idea of science talk is just babble. It's ridiculous. It makes no
Yeah.
sense. But Strange New Worlds has made some moves. I mean, one of the things that impressed me with season 1, even though I was completely annoyed with the whole bringing in the Gorn, because it just absolutely destroys canon.
Well,
Destroys it.
they also changed the Gorn. The Gorn are an advanced race and civilization, and what they've done on Strange New Worlds is they've made them this advanced civilization that's somehow kind of backwards, and they turn the Gorn into creatures that eat people, which goes against what the Gorn were originally invented as. I mean, again, one more reason why
They were
Strange
just
New Worlds-
another Klingon race, is really
Yeah,
what they were. They were very similar to the Klingons. And the only reason why the Gorn are being used, by the way, if you think about it, is because of how much they fucked up with the Klingons in Discovery.
Well, it's
why.
another thing that points to the fact that this is actually an alternative timeline to the timeline that we actually know for this series and this cartoon.
It is
That's
still
all it
part
is.
of the JJ verse. It still is.
It's an alternative timeline.
And people are fooling themselves that think that it's. I hate the use of the word prime in this case because it's a made up term to make you think, to trick you into thinking that it's TOS related, and it's not.
Yeah.
They got Kirk wrong. He's completely wrong. He never met Pike, but saw him once at a Federation event. That's it. And we get that right out of Star Trek. He says it when he meets Pike for the first time when he's in the wheelchair. Just nobody fucking pays attention. Anyway,
it's not an alternative timeline. It's just crap.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. By the way, another great episode that a lot of people forget about, there's a revisiting of the amusement planet in this series called Once Upon a Planet. And it's season 1, episode 10, I think, something like that.
I think it is. Yeah.
It's either 9 or 10. It's almost near the end of the season. And it's a return to the planet with the Alice in Wonderland rabbit, all of that shit. And it was fun getting to see these things. We got to see sequels to episodes of the original series.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, we had to wait till Wrath of Khan to get our Khan sequel.
Well, here's the other thing, though. This is one of the few times that a Federation starship is shown to be equipped with seatbelts, a common sense precaution.
That's right.
Absence at long puzzled fans. Perhaps
Not
the only
until we
other
saw
time.
Star Trek: The Motion Picture, where they had the things that.
Actually, I think it's perhaps the only other time was a deleted scene in Star Trek Nemesis, where they had seatbelts also.
Was there ever a bathroom in the animated series?
Yes.
That's always
in the animated series.
No.
There are bathrooms according to the tech manual.
One's on the other side of the view screen.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Well, they thought about it, but they were like, "We're never going to show this." I don't think they even showed any of the main characters coming out of a bathroom in the original series. I don't remember ever seeing that.
Nope. That's good. That's good. We see now. If Kurtzman Trek wanted to be do something really striking,
It's also Kurtzman, Read by Nature. Kurtzman co-wrote it.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry, Keith. Go ahead. I was responding to it.
No, I bring that up also in part because one of the first things they did on Babylon 5 was to make sure to show them actually using the restroom because it drove JMS up the wall.
Well, look, bathroom time is, we all have it. Most of us love our bathroom time because it's the one moment where we're left completely the fuck alone. And it's important. Personal time. And so we always made the joke. I'm sure Keith jumped in there and did this too. Captain's log. Come on.
Yeah, everybody does that joke once or twice. At least once.
At least once. I made a captain's log. So,
It's like all
but
officers on deck. 1 minute, Captain.
I'm sorry.
they do have, and I'm double checking right now. There is a harness in on Archer's Enterprise, but there is something that looks like a seatbelt, but it's not a belt. It's a thing that does like this over the captain's lap. And I think other crew have them on their seats too, where they're able to pull them over their laps. It's the equivalent of like the gate thing you pull down on a roller coaster.
Mhm.
So was that the point of the sashes in the Mirror Universe? You just attach it to the seat when you're sitting down?
Okay, look, Che, I'm going to give you a straight answer. There should be no water in those toilets. It should immediately vaporize whatever drops out of you,
Mhm.
or it transports it into nothingness.
Well, no. It's a part of the system. This is the one thing that Kurtzman tried.
That's how they
to
make
do
their
by-
food.
Yeah, it's waste. So the waste gets transmuted into something else.
No. It's how they write new episodes of Star Trek Discovery.
I like these new rice snacks. What are these? They're delicious.
Why am I here? Help!
And mine has corn in it.
They actually have a joke on The Expanse like that, where the guys at Martian is like, "This was made from urine." It's like, really? So I'm drinking your pee because it's delicious.
Wow.
Willie,
Okay.
Willie, you're a sad, sad person right now for saying that. Everybody read it. Read it. Bathrooms are important, man. Some of your best thinking happens in there.
You know what? Every man who was once a boy, toilet humor is a part of growing up. It's a part of it's a part of what you learned as a young boy. And if you've never had that, I feel bad for you.
I've had too much of it.
And we're just
growing up
teasing
with
you,
Fuck
Willie. We're
Brothers.
not fucking with
Jesus
you. We're
Christ.
just teasing you. That's all. Oh my God, they're discussing this seriously. Vinkman's girl, because Vinkman's girl apparently has never gone to the bathroom or farted.
Oh,
Women are not allowed to fart is the universal law of the universe.
Everybody knows girls don't do that because it's disgusting.
Whatever.
I you know what? The only person that's allowed to comment is somebody that actually grew up with sisters.
I had sisters.
Yeah, I have those too. I have.
They
everything.
farted like
I have
crazy.
8 siblings.
Worst episode of the season 1 of Star Trek animated series I'm going to mention is the final episode of the season was Jihad. I just didn't think it was that good an episode.
Mm-hmm.
It was bleh, you know. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I like the episode. I like the episode, the Terran incident, because it's every show in the whether you're in the 60s or not. I mean, really in the 60s, there was a lot of obsession about shrinking things. I never understood that, but I mean, it was always fun to see episodes where characters had to be different size. To see how they handle this, a particular situation. It's just a me thing, microscopic. I think from being a young boy, and when you're young, the world's bigger than you are.
Impressionable, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to show this. This was the first episode of season 2, the Orion Pirates, I think was the name of it. But another example of the color blindness problem with, even though you said he wasn't involved, we still had color issues going into season 2. So I think he was somehow involved with the bright greens. And
it's the purple with it, man. That just makes you go, what the?
Because these are contrasting colors, because green, when turned negative, is purple. And so they're not supposed to go together. That's why it clashes, but in an interesting way, like the Joker uses those colors. But the other problem is skin colors. Sometimes you get this grayish hue to things because, once again, color blindness prevents you from seeing certain colors of pink. And you see it as gray.
Well, here's also here's something that you know, a lot of people may not know. The writer of this episode, Harold Weinstein, was 19 years old, making him the youngest writer in the Star Trek universe. Weinstein adapted a short story that he had written for his high school science fiction magazine and mailed it to the show's producers. So this is one of those rare instances where somebody just basically had an idea, wrote it out, and sent it in, and they actually used it.
Yeah, and the basic story is this. Spock is diagnosed with a fatal disease that's going to kill him very quickly. And just so happens there's this ship that's carrying the cure to this disease that gets attacked by the Orion pirates, bringing the crew of the Enterprise into the story. And it's a good episode. Season 2, episode 1 kicks it right off with a really good storyline. And they understood the popularity of Spock. In fact, Shatner wasn't as big of a deal to them as Spock was. And because it's Leonard Nimoy who pressured them into hiring the other actors. Because they needed Spock back for this show to work. So it's something they understood that I don't know if Gene ever completely understood that.
But you need the three of them. You need
the Holy Trinity of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Bones, Kirk, and McCoy.
It doesn't work if you have only two of them. You need all three.
You mean Spock, Kirk, and McCoy?
You said Bones twice.
I did. Yeah, you know what I meant. But yeah, they just worked, which is why by season 2 of the original series, McCoy was in the lead credits. He became a main character.
Yep.
And what's that? Keith?
Oh, no. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you had something else to add to that.
They also made a good joke in the Trials and Tribulations in DS9 when Dax is seeing Kirk and Spock. It's like, he's so handsome, and Cisco thinks he's talking about Kirk. It's like, no, Spock.
By the way, if Gene really had that idea that the Klingons were supposed to look the way they look, the animated series was the place where they could have started that with the bumpy foreheads. But they didn't. I think that's an afterthought that came about because of the motion picture. They needed to go with a whole new look.
I tend to call it George Lucas syndrome when there's things that they just decide to change years later, but then they're asking like it was the plan all along.
Right. It's like sure, George. Right.
Yeah, because Vader means father in Dutch. Yes, because there's Dutch all over.
Now, look, I'm going to tell you, there are some things that he did do. Like, a lot of people don't know that Dagobah actually has meaning in Hinduism, the word Dagobah.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew that when Empire Strikes Back came out, that there were all these things that just had actual Yoda. The name Yoda itself is meant to sound like yoga. Again, connected with Hinduism in India and all that. There's a lot of stuff, Eastern philosophy. So there is stuff, but yeah, I call bullshit on that too, Shinatsky.
Yeah, well, don't forget Dark Side. It's like he really likes Marvel. He really likes DC Comics.
Yeah.
Well,
but I will point out something. A lot of people thought that the Sith thing came about later. And it's like, no, it was in the original novelization.
Yeah.
Which was based off of the original script that George wrote that was adapted by Alan Dean Foster. And Sith Lord was mentioned in there, that Darth Vader was a Sith Lord.
And just to tie it back to everything, the popularity of Star Wars is why the Star Trek films ended up happening.
And George admits to it. George and Gene had a conversation about that they both kind of inspired one another.
Yep.
And I thought that was interesting that George was inspired by Star Trek, but in turn, by doing what he did, he inspired Gene to do things the way he did when they moved finally to do the movie. Because it was going to be Star Trek Phase 2, a series.
It was easier to get the studio to want to do stuff with Star Trek after the success of Star Wars. So the next episode is Beam, season 2, episode 2. And that particular one is an episode that was written by Roddenberry, David Gerald, and DC Fontana. and Hal Sutherland was able to hand off directing duties officially to Bill Reed, who would take over for the rest of the season with this particular episode. And this was also the first time that Captain James T. Kirk's middle name of Tiberius is revealed on screen.
That's right. It was James R. Kirk first, because apparently Kirk's best friend didn't know his name, and then later in the series it was James T. Kirk. But it was in the animated series that his name was said for the first time of Tiberius. That's right.
Mm-hmm. And it was canonized officially with the movie Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country. So again, it's
when Cybok says his full name, James Tiberius Kirk. Isn't that he's the one who delivers it? Cybok, right?
No. Star
Undiscovered
Trek
Country
6. It's the one that it's the Klingon trial. James.
Oh, the Klingon.
Here we go.
General Kang
to the
trial.
architect of the crime.
Still one of my favorite Klingon lines, though.
Tiberius Kirk. That was it. I stand corrected. But here's the other thing about season 2 of Star Trek, the animated series. They only got 6 episodes. There was a noticeable drop in quality of the shows from season 1. They're still good. They're still really good. But there was a noticeable drop, and NBC saw that the audience was dropping with that, and
they were
immediately canceled it.
They were getting beat by the success of
Super Friends.
Super Friends.
Yep.
That show just took off. Literally just took off. That show was so popular. And I remember they ended up turning the title graphic into a poster, and it became super popular amongst kids to have that poster on your wall. So they were fighting a little bit of an uphill battle, basically, because it's hard to compete against characters who can fly and do stuff when you have a bunch of characters with their scripts being written by noted science fiction professionals to have to compete against, Wendy, Marvin, and Wondermutt. So,
right. But the series was so good. It's worth noting some of the better episodes. Let's talk about some more episodes, Keith.
Yes.
Go ahead. Let's hear some of yours. I've thrown out mine.
Okay. Another episode that was actually referenced earlier by one of our viewers, The Practical Joker.
Yes.
Okay.
Where the computer starts playing jokes on the crew.
Oh my goodness. I do remember this episode, and I have to admit it had its moments. It had its moments. The Practical Joker was actually written by Roddenberry, Chuck Menville, and DC Fontana. Okay. And in that one, it's in the midst of a standoff with Romulans. The Enterprise computer systems gain partial sentience, and with it starts playing practical jokes upon the crew, which leads to a dangerous life and death battle with the Romulans. So this was actually the first time in Star Trek that you had the appearance of the holodeck, and it's called a recreation deck in this particular episode, and where everything was during this period. Some consider this the prototype of the holodeck used in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Yeah, this is a really cool story, though. I mean, it's classic Star Trek, and to do this with to do this was kind of old hat, but to have it done for Saturday morning and for the kids, and plus Lou Scheimer got in on the act and was the voice of the Romulan crewman. So it's not the first time that time that he did that. Lou Scheimer again was the power behind Filmation, and was many of the voices that you would come to know in some of the later animated series, all the way into and including He-Man.
I'm not surprised to hear that. I'm not surprised to learn that. Not at all. But it's a fun episode. It really is.
Yeah.
The computer's just being a dick. But sadly, once again, we only got 6 episodes in the second season. Episode 2 of the season, again, Spock's a main character in it. Bem was the name of the episode.
Yeah.
A reckless observer bothers Kirk and Spock while they are on a planetary scouting mission. It's not that memorable. It's just a fun episode. Albatross was episode 4, right after Practical Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's your classic Star Trek title right here. How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth.
Oh, yes.
The Enterprise crew encounters an alien who visited ancient Earth and became known as the Mayan god Kukulkan, also known as Quetzalcoatl, Q, the plumed serpent. So, and it's really kind of cool. You get to see an animated version of Quetzalcoatl.
Wow. Well, that episode was written by Roddenberry, Russell Bates, and David Wise, and basically the title, I think, is based upon a quote from William Shakespeare's play King Lear, Act 1, Scene 4, which is also referenced again in Star Trek: The Voyage Home.
See, I like the way they actually come up with their titles. They're actually referencing literature instead of just throwing random Latin.
Well, classic Trek started that way. I mean, Who Mourns Adonis? Titles like that. They're just classic titles. Shows today have a tendency of just being too obvious with their titles. Speaking of Scheimer, I pre-ordered the time-limited Mondo Skeletor the other week. Looking forward to that one. It's gonna be cool.
Wow.
You literally can say they don't make them like they used to anymore when it comes to a series like this, because the idea that they have for mature for a lot of animated series is basically to make it an adult, but like the juvenile version of an adult, like Lower Decks, where it's like a bunch of sex jokes and everything else. This is mature as in actual adult maturity.
Well, if you look back to when we were kids, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure you're the same way. We did a lot more stuff with our parents, and my dad would take me to see movies, and I would watch movies with my dad, not kid movies. We are so fixated with our kids today that we make everything about them instead of involving them in what we're doing.
Yep.
And so they begin to think that the world revolves around their asses when they need to become more accustomed to learning that that's not how fucking things work. And so we grew up in an era when my dad wanted to go see Serpico. I went to see Serpico with my dad.
Well,
if my dad wanted to watch a movie that had violence and bad language and some nudity in it, I went with my dad.
And that explains so much about Gary.
Yeah, he'd do this shit to me, but there you go. But I know I'm not the only one, because I just talked to some people over the week that said, yeah, it's the same thing, man. My dad would I have this great love. And one of those is Mark Center on our Wednesday show. Mark Center grew up the same way with, his parents taking him. He got to watch movies, real movies. And so we tend to be a little more well-rounded from that era because we know cinema better than most people. That's why guys like Keith and I, when we start talking about this stuff, we've actually we've been immersed in this for 50 years.
Yeah.
This isn't something we just started liking in our 50s or 40s. This is something we've done all our life. And so this stuff is part of us. It's just part of us. And it leads us into, this final episode of the series. Sadly, it was the end of the series.
Yeah.
But it brought us something that was really freaking cool.
Yep.
We finally got to see the original captain of the USS Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Robert April.
Yep.
And no, not like the one you see in Star Trek Strange New World. He was based on Gene Roddenberry. And
Mhm.
so that was Captain Robert April with his wife. And in the final episode, who wrote that one, by the way, Keith? Who wrote the final episode?
This episode was actually written by Gene Roddenberry, Fred Bronson, and
Yeah,
DC
Fred
Fontana.
Bronson. Yeah, because Fred Bronson ended up working later, as I recall, on Next Generation, didn't he?
I think so. Hold on, let me look that up.
I'm pretty sure he did the Menage a Troy episode.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was him.
This episode does get a little weird because, I grew up with Next Gen where, like you couldn't go past 10 and they're going to like warp 32 in this episode.
Well,
yeah, he wrote 2 episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yep, he did. I know he did. Correct me. He did Menage a Troy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What was the other one he did?
Hold on, I'm trying to find that one right now. Menage a Troy was one, and the other one being, oh, that's not right. Hold on. The Game.
Oh shit, he did that one.
Yeah.
That was look. It was still during the Mary Sue years of Wesley Crusher, but I liked that one where you would play this game and it would unlock your brain, and an alien or something was took control of your brain.
Yeah,
it was hijackers. They were basically going to steal the Enterprise.
That was it. The game was meant to unlock the crew so they could unlock the Enterprise. That was it. And again, Wesley Crusher, hero.
Oh yeah, well, that episode was written literally because parent doesn't understand what his kid's into. Goes, these video games he's playing must be brainwashing him. Literally wrote his fears.
Well, yeah, there is that connection. Yeah, it's like they're going to make you devil worshippers.
This is the last. This is the actual last production, Star Trek production, until Star Trek: The Motion Picture 5 years later.
5 years later.
So this would be the longest period of time in which the franchise lay dormant.
Because it was right around 75, 2 years later, that they began pre-production on Phase 2.
Yes.
What was planned to be Phase 2.
Phase 2, but also they began a lot of the work that was for Planet of the Titans also. A lot of that stuff started coming through at that time because they were trying to decide.
Yeah, I was reading that. Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
No, whoever pulled that. There we go. Thank you. Separate entertainment networks led to bifurcation. Disney Channel, for example. Look, a lot of things really changed around that time in the 80s. We saw a serious drop in quality of writing during the 80s, too. And we didn't see a beef up of writing again until Next Generation. Everything was like really homogenized. If you think about it, from 1980 through 87 was very homogenized. And it was thanks to Fox. Fox is a network. They helped bring about some of the change that was needed in how things were written. And 87, of course, brought us to Next Generation. And all Next Generation was a remake of Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yep.
Deanna Troi was Aliyah. Riker was Decker. I mean, he didn't even try to change the slight enunciation.
Don't forget, they just used scripts that were unproduced for the original series.
During the writer's strike.
Yeah,
during the writer's strike, one of my favorites of that was meant to be a Phase 2 script. And it was when the devil reappears for that planet. And Data, originally Spock, was meant to be the arbiter of a court case for this person, the devil, to prove who they were. That they were who they said they were. And Picard, of course, was based on Kirk's part.
The new version of Kirk that they were trying to write. Because Kirk was going to change in Phase 2. They had written the Kirk character differently.
Boy, I wonder how Shatner felt about that.
I don't think he cared at that point. He was still trying.
It's a paycheck.
Yeah.
Yep. He was paying so much fucking alimony. That guy had to work all the time. Alimony and child support.
But he did it happily because back then, the guy was a real responsible guy. He could have been a douche about it, and he wasn't. He lived up to his obligations to make sure that his daughters grew up with everything they ever wanted. So he was a good dad.
It's true. And it also led to, when he was broke, it led to one of my favorite stories about him when he was out living in his camper shell. He had a little pickup truck with a camper shell. And he would he'd camp out and he would fucking fish and hunt for his food. He had no money. Yeah. And he was going to go fishing one day, and he was sitting on the back step of this camper shell of the door, and he's sitting at the base of it, and his kid saw him and recognized him. He goes, "You're Captain Kirk." And he goes, "Shh, I'm on a away mission." That made that kid's fucking life. You're having Captain Kirk telling him, "Shh, I'm on an away mission." I wish that had happened to me.
I always loved the first season episode, the one where the population is enslaved because they have them on drugs. They're telling them, well, if they don't take them, they'll die, but they're really...
Oh, that had Merritt Buttrick in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He played Kirk's son. It was right before he died from pneumonia, from AIDS-related pneumonia. He played the part of one of the aliens, and come to find out they're addicted to drugs. They think that this is something required for them to live, and all it is they've gotten them addicted to where that anytime they stop taking it, they think they're getting sick. It's just the DTs.
Yep.
Fascinating story. Yes, Brian says Gary's entire life is an away mission, away from sanity. He also said something before. I want to show this one. Story of Gary's life: random violence and nudity. Is it Conan or is it something from Gary's life?
70s. Is Gary the one naked, or is it the women around
You
him?
never know. You never, ever know until it happens. TAS, the animated series, was in the kids' time slot, but it was not a kids' show. Absolutely specifically any more than TOS. There is documentation about the creation of the show to prove it. No, I absolutely know you're right. We all know you're right. The animated series was not written at a child's level. It was simplified, is all they did.
Yep.
And that was done for two things. One, they didn't have an hour. They had to do it all in a half hour. And on top of that, it was done to make it simpler for kids, so it wasn't too psychologically complicated for them. Because Saturday mornings was kids' time. But I felt like it gave us real storytelling as compared to some of the other crap we watched. Don't get me wrong. I love the Lassie animated series. I loved watching Emergency, the animated series. Emergency 51, I think was the name of it, wasn't it? Wasn't that the name of the Emergency series? Emergency 51.
Yeah.
Based off of the Jack Webb series, Emergency, which is what made me want to become a paramedic. It's what drove that into me. I want to be that. The existence of Gary's pants has yet to be proven. Yeah, it's true.
Hey,
Even
Matt's
Scott's
in the
not sure.
house.
Matt Vader, I know that guy. He's my arch nemesis.
Hi, V.
Just popping in to say hi. Got work, but this was a cool series. Glad you think so, Matt. Glad you think so. I am thinking about doing this, Keith, that we should do a watch party through Discord and invite some of our followers and viewers to join us and watch some of these episodes. There's only 22 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
2 seasons.
That'd be kind of
That's
cool.
a great idea.
They go by really quickly. So we'd probably be able to do it in like three nights. Just watch like a movie's length worth of episodes 3 or 4 times, and that's it. The series is over. I can't type. Popping in to say hi. Matt Vader, I ride bad typing. I read by bad typing. So I actually, when I read what you said, I read what you meant, not what you wrote. Did they have a site consultant also? Like in the no, that shit didn't come about until the moms overactively got involved with TV.
Mhm.
Moms and are what ruined Brian Saturday morning cartoons. It was no longer cost effective, and everything had to be educational. And look.
Well,
I'm going to quote my own sister, who I love her. She's a moron. My own sister turned to me, and I said, "Why is your 13-year-old daughter in the living room watching Barney?" And she says, "A child will come to you if they want to be educated." I went, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. A child won't do shit if you leave it up to them. You have to initiate. You have to start things. Your kid is basically," and I use the R word with her. I said, because she's not getting the education she needs. You're teaching her things that a 4-year-old watches, and she's 13. It led to a big fight between my sister and me. I walked away from it. I completely crushed her in the argument, in the debate, but there's no winning with somebody when they're that, well, like my sister, one of my sisters. They are collector booster packs, and there's a bounty for 3 million for the one ring. That must be Monkey Jeebus. Yeah, it's Monkey Jeebus. I'm like, that's a total nonsense. That's a complete non sequitur. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a non sequitur. Oh, it's Monkey Jeebus. Okay.
He's not here for our topic.
I bought 3. Look, non sequiturs are okay, Anima. I like non sequiturs, but when I'm in this
dishwasher,
when I am reckless, what is Six talking about? What was she referring to?
I think they're having a separate conversation in the chat again.
In the chat? Don't get involved with the chat. Don't do it. Nobody get involved with the chat.
I just want to say Six is awesome. I love her deeply, and all of you suck compared to her.
Nobody's going to argue with you. Why? You say these things like you're going to get an argument when you know you're not going to get an argument. E. Clay Thomason is here. For better or worse, you can't parent other people's kids. No, it's just walk the fuck away, or report them to social services if they're really, really bad. Just report them. Let the nanny state deal with them. And Kyle is here. I haven't played his video today. What is his video? I shall play his video. Let's see. Where's it at? There it is.
Hey, fuck you, Kyle.
Yeah. And
Gary,
this is how Six fights. Are you ready? Here's Six fighting.
There's a camera on my back.
Hey. The girl is me. She would throw dirt in my face.
you would pay for her to throw dirt in your face. I know you.
That's true.
You would pay anybody to stomp on your nuts.
No, just sick.
You're a pervert.
Meanwhile.
But no, one you might want to get, Gary, is South Park, when they have the older Cartman. He's teaching his little grandchild to go, fuck you, Uncle Kyle.
Fuck you, Uncle Kyle. Actually, one of my favorite old episodes, I think it was season 1, is the Planetarium episode, which is an homage to Star Trek, the classic series, the original.
Oh,
the only
Footloose, man.
Footloose.
That's what they were playing in Planetarium. We were doing the show.
What?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
It's the Planetarium. You mean Planetarium? No, Planetarium.
Planetarium, because he can't pronounce T's.
Yeah. And the thing that he was using to brainwash everyone is he'd have Footloose playing while the show was going on.
Okay. I didn't understand what the fuck you meant. Now, okay, yeah. They were using Footloose to brainwash them. Throw the word brainwash in, and you would have gotten me. Confused me like they were doing an homage to Footloose. What? Now, yeah, absolutely right. They were. But anyway, anything else you want to talk about with this, Keith, before we end the show?
Well, for those that want to continue learning all about this, you can check out the Star Trek: The Official Guide to the Animated Series, which was a book that I think was released in 2019.
Was it from Vegas? Because I hear that Vegas is the center of where you know everything about Star Trek. Keith and I that's an inside joke about somebody.
Oh, man.
Not going to say who it is.
Look. Anyway, the book is available. You can find it released through, or you can buy a copy, I should say, through Amazon and any other major booksellers, Barnes & Noble, others. The authors, Rich Sherpas and Aaron Harvey. And the book seems to have not only all the information that we talked about today, but also a few other things that you might be interested to know. But the book definitely is a must-have for all fans of Star Trek, the animated series, as well as Star Trek, the series.
And you can buy Star Trek, the animated series on Amazon, and I checked it's even at Walmart.com. You want to get it there.
Outstanding.
Nothing like physical media.
Let's get together and talk about doing a get together and watching some of these, all of the episodes of Star Trek, the animated series together. I think it'd be fun. I think that'd be fun to do it as a group. But until then, we are reaching the end of the show. So I want to do all my thank yous. First of all, I want to thank KGRA for listening. I also want to suggest that, hey, if you enjoy this show, please do click the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. We like those subscriptions. All of that helps the algorithm for the show. We want to thank KGRA's audience for listening to us. We are working on getting an ability for you to call in, and I'm going to try to implement it as soon as possible. We're just going to create a phone number that you will call in on, and Martine will have to take your calls. So I apologize in advance if you have trouble understanding him.
I don't think that is a very wise idea.
Well, it's got to be you or John. It's one of you have to take the phone calls. But it'll be a number I create, and I'll take care of that. And you will just log in, and you will take the calls and put them through the microphone or something. We'll go over it. But I want to thank Annie Morrow, Penny, Slasher Fred, Dragon Ruse, Alex Moore, 6 with big letters, and then Sagacious 6 and Jedi 6, all the same person, the wonderful and beautiful 6. Cocho Dragon. It's a House of Dragons today. Let's see. Who else? The 70s rock fan, my good friend Brian. Mighty Orbots was here. War Monkey. If you need a monkey for war, that's the guy to go. Go get him. Let's see. Who else was here today? Scribelight was here. Zax. Anti-Derivative Jill was here. The AI Show. Willie the Monkey King's Music. Our Muslim Uncle. The Peter Vinkman fan site, a.k.a. Vinkman's Girl. Archimage Frey, Matt Vader 74, very dear friend of the show and of myself. Monka Jubas, thank you. Come again. It's also a House of Monkeys. E. Clay Thomason, and I want to thank all of you for being here today. You took time out of your day, and we appreciate it. Please don't forget, click the like, leave a comment. We love your comments, and you know that I like and respond to all comments.
Speaking of E. Clay, read this one.
I write the link to your YouTube on every bathroom stall I go in, Gary. Thank you, Clay. You're the dude.
Fantastic.
For a good time, check out Pop Culture Minefield.
I swear to God, if I start getting phone calls about that, I'm getting a hold of you, Clay. Keith, thanks for being here, man, and laying down some knowledge. I appreciate it.
I appreciate being on the show, everybody. And I appreciate everybody taking time to listen and actually act like I know what I'm talking about for a while.
And
anyway.
You do, Keith. I want to thank Anima for being here and enjoying the Star Trek animated series so far. It's really awesome. Thank you, Shinatsky, for throwing down some information, too, and asking some great questions. And Martin, thank you again for being the right side of my brain. I deeply appreciate it. With that, Bill, take us out of here. We'll see you guys later. Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
Those sons of bitches.
Ma, I'm doing a show.